am editor of Lituanus, and I'm very happy that today we will be discussing the ethnographic fiction by Neringa Klumbite. Our webinar is called Ukraine Stories of Occupation. And I know that all of us are following the news, so you probably are aware that there was another massive attack on Kiev with cruise missiles, ballistic missiles yesterday with drones. So we definitely are in our hearts with the Ukrainians, and we remember everybody who is in those horrible conditions, and very, very obviously sorry about the people who died during this attack, who were killed during this attack. So today I'd like to welcome three participants, and I'd like to introduce them briefly. And we will hear from Neringa Klumbite, who is the professor of anthropology and Eastern European studies and director of Lithuanian and Ukraine program at Havinger Center for Russian and Post-Soviet Studies at Miami University in Ohio. And she's also a senior research associate at the Lithuanian Institute of History. And also, I would like to welcome Arvydas Grishinas, who is a senior researcher at the Lithuanian Institute of History, and also Yulia Yurchuk, who is associate professor of history of ideas at Södertörn University in Stockholm, Sweden. So we have definitely very nice group, and I hope that we will also have a nice conversation after the presentations, because there will be time left for that. Before we start, I'd like to very, very briefly talk about Lituanus, this journal who's organizing this webinar. And I hope that you read it, subscribe it. Neringa's essays are available for free right now on our website. And our journal is a very special journal. From the beginning, the idea was to make it widely read, widely available in all academic settings and libraries. And even though it was not specifically written for the diaspora, Lithuanian American diaspora, it depended heavily on the diaspora. And in 1963, the nonprofit Lituanus Foundation was created to oversee the quarterly, and this is the case today. So as the time went on, Lituanus underwent several identity changes. Instead of being kind of like a bulletin with interesting facts, it became an academic publication with a focus on cultural topics. And later on, especially during the 1960s, 1970s, it had a very high status in the Lithuanian diaspora. And famous Lithuanian authors such as Tomas Venclova, Algirdas Landsbergis, Jonas Mekas, and others were publishing in it. So it definitely had a very important history during the Cold War, and it continues to be an important actor in the Lithuanian diaspora. And obviously, anybody who's interested in Lithuanian studies, we hope that will read us. My own first encounter with Lituanus was in 2010 when Violeta Kellertas, who was the editor of Lituanus then, invited me to contribute an essay that I presented at the Baltic Studies Conference to the journal, and I have been a reader of this journal ever since. So obviously there's no shortage of academic publications on the Baltic states. There are many journals with that focus, but I think we have our own identity. We experiment with different genres, so we're very happy that Neringa agreed to contribute her very interesting essays to us. Again, we hope that Lituanus will remain both scholarly and accessible, and will be of interest not just to the academics, but also to the broader public. So with that, I will give the floor to Neringa, who will talk about her research in Ukraine and also about her most recent contribution to Lituanus.
Thank you, Dovile, and congratulations with the second terrific issue of Lituanus with you as the editor-in-chief. And thank you, Yulia and Arvydas, for joining this webinar, and to all in the audience. Welcome and thanks for joining. I'll be looking forward to your comments and questions in the discussion about Ukraine, of course, as well. So my idea was first to talk about the context of my research and those stories that I hope some of you read. They are based on anthropological research, ethnographic research in Ukraine since 2024, specifically on the territories that were formerly occupied and then liberated since access. Although I have done several interviews with people who just left occupied territories or live in those territories but commute. This is very dangerous, and the major interviewees are from the territories that were deoccupied in very different regions. So the primary focus is on the 2022 occupation, and I could speak more about testimonies themselves. I understand them as a form of justice and truth in most cases, in the context where Russian propaganda are saying very different things. So we have, of course, troops at the front lines and not just at the front lines. And we also have that soft power, speaking truth to power in the context where Russia spends billions of dollars for propaganda. I imagine that most of you know, but for those who not necessarily are familiar with, I'm sorry, just how um, how occupation happened. So since 2014 to the beginning of 2026, Russian Federation occupied about 20% of Ukraine's territory. The Kiev region, as you saw, was liberated very quickly in a month, and Chernihiv parts of Chernihiv and parts of Sumy region. Now kind of the wave has transitioned to the Ukrainian side, and I read in the news just recently that Ukrainians are able to liberate more than Russians are able to occupy. But to give you a sense of the occupation, so this territory that is occupied is the size of Pennsylvania. About the size of Pennsylvania, for those who are in the Baltics, it would be almost the entire Lithuania and Latvia. And in Europe, it would be Belgium, Netherlands, Luxembourg, Switzerland, and the big part of Denmark. So it's a very large territory. The way I interview people, I meet with some of them several times, and of course, they tell their stories. And here I just wanted to tell one of those stories and kind of introduce you to one of the prominent claims that emerge in those stories, that only death is worse than occupation. So if you are not part of that environment, sometimes it's hard to understand what occupation is like. And of course, occupations are very different, even Russian occupations. I traveled to Mykolaiv region, and well, just recently returned from Vishneva, for example, which was occupied but did not experience terrible atrocities, although some people were taken to Balaklia, and that's the Kharkiv Oblast, and then, ended up being tortured and imprisoned. But the city, the village itself, was not destroyed as many others, like Izum, for example, or Borodyanka, or there was not something like what happened in Bucha. Nevertheless, for example, Olena, that's not a real name, from Kharkiv Oblast, said during the occupation for half a year she couldn't get out. Well, she would get out sometime. She was very much afraid to be seen by soldiers. She was not saying what she wanted to say because she was afraid to be denounced by her neighbors. Um, she couldn't travel. She couldn't continue her career. She couldn't dream about the future. Um, Sometimes, people say, we were reduced to just survive and think about nothing else. Nevertheless, Olena secretly taught children Ukrainian language. And although Russians would say, that Ukrainians do not exist, that the Ukrainian language does not exist, she knew they do exist. And after the liberation, of course, the Kharkiv region is under the heavy shelling. She said, I live under shelling. It's terrible. It's the war, but it's better than an occupation because I am free. And that motive of freedom is very, very much prominent for many people who lived under occupation. So Maxim Butkevich, who is a journalist and also a former prisoner of war, who spent 2 years and 4 months in the Russian prison, and a former soldier, Ukrainian soldier, he said that captivity is the occupation of the person in all the details of his or her daily life. An occupation is the captivity of many people who are denied the opportunity to influence their own destiny. And this is what we see in many cases. So the beginning of the war marked kind of moving underground because people had to hide from shelling and bombs. So many of them lived in what they call pitvals or pogrebs. And these are basements, but it's not the basement which would be warm and cozy. This is the basement that you see here.
I'm sorry, if somebody could please mute themselves.
This is actually Davila speaking, my video speaking. Uh, so, um, so this is where they had to hide from shelling in the beginning of the war for many years, for many days, and even now, many of them who live in that highly shelled area, they would hide in pitvals and pogrebs. Some people were used as human shields. This is a well-known case of Yahidne, but it's not just in Yahidne. And here you see on the wall, they wrote who died in the basement where they were in the school. They were kept in the basement, over 400 children, people. And on this side, or no, which side now, I don't remember, but one side is where people who died in the basement, and the other side is people who were killed in the village itself. These are just some images from Yahidne's basement. This is where they couldn't sleep, they couldn't lay down because there were so many people. They could just sit or stand, and this was the wall that they pointed to where they would hang their clothing. And of what you see here, so upstairs, and this was a very common report in many interviews, the Russian army soldiers would use that room as their bathroom, and all that stuff would just go down the wall. Now, spaces have been redefined in villages and towns. Those homes that were occupied, people would remember everything what was left, and that they have been cleaning those homes for several weeks, and it still felt like it's not theirs. In one home, there was food that was left and underwear. Public spaces are redefined as well. This is in Yahidne. People would point out and say, under this apple tree, or maybe this apple tree. Now I'm looking, this is too big for an apple tree. I have to look back at my notes. The neighbor was killed and was there for several days until they allowed to pick them up These are again spaces full of all kind of memories. You see the shooting here, and while you drive, this is the Kharkiv region road to Izum. People would point out and say all these fields and forests are currently mined. Right, I'll go to the next. We see also that examples of carnivalesque violence, where people would shoot for fun Russian soldiers. And in one of my story, I talk about how they were settled. This is a true fact, like many facts that are mentioned in those stories, would sit in the attic and shoot at the chicken when they got bored. And this is in one of the Ukrainian painters' homes, where they used his paint to draw elephant, and these are some other art, occupiers' art. There are many things that testify as well. People made candles because there was no light. They cooked outside and invented all kind of forms of cooking and preparing food. There are lots of stories about stealing things. This is the underwear I mentioned in that was left in one home. And in one case in Velika Dimerka, a person said when they were already leaving after a month of occupation, they took everything what they could take with them. And on one tank, they saw a bucket filled with all kind of uh, Ukrainian things that they were not able to fit in the tank itself. I couldn't understand what they were telling me, so I asked to draw. The conversation was in the school, how they really put that bucket on a tank, and that's the picture that they showed, drew on the blackboard. And bodies also testify, and this is something for me as a social scientist that is hard to fit into the social science language. All those emotions and suffering and pain, loss of home and family, and as we know uh, from literature, that emotions are a very important part of telling the story. So this is something that you can include into social science pieces, but ultimately, I feel I could tell more with the stories, like I did with ethnographic fiction. So all these things, they are kind of better to communicate in stories rather than social science articles. But at the same time, I'm not saying that it's not possible. Now, again, I cite Maxim Butkevich: by taking away freedom, the occupiers also take away a piece of humanity, that which makes us human, the ability to choose our own. And I know I have to finish. And here, I just add Fanon's quote, who said that healing is only possible when society itself is liberated. So these are big questions. Of course, we have no time to explore in more detail, but I would like to say that people in Ukraine, those who live in those hard hit areas, and they reclaim that humanity every day, sometimes inch by inch, while cleaning their gardens from mines by themselves and ruins. And here you see in Borodanka images drawn by Banksy, the artist, on those destroyed homes by aerial bombs in the beginning of the occupation. This is Izum, and um, people say in Izum and other places, we will rebuild the schools, we will rebuild our homes, and even if 40% of territory in Kharkiv Oblast is mined or hazardous, people would still go and collect those mushrooms, and I don't know how they do it. And We even have in 7C, there are special brand honey of the minefields, Med Minnych Poliv. And this is from Vishneva, the school that they are also committed to rebuild and plant a garden of cherry trees. And they also have a beautiful park. They also have an amazing museum. And the town that is less than 1,000 inhabitants are still planning about the future, even if it is 30 kilometers from the border from Russia. And this is just a sound for you to hear, um, uh, created during the occupation by a person in Kherson who has not left all the months during the occupation. Oops, now I did something what I was not supposed to do. Okay, so, and he called it a beautiful song. And again, for me, from my perspective, it's not necessarily resistance, although we can call it resistance, but it is also reclaiming that humanity that people were deprived of. And this is kind of a very powerful and gives a big hope that ми переможемо, як Ukrainians. Okay, and I have a few slides and a few comments about those three stories, but I will better stop here. I'm not sharing it anymore, am I? Okay, good. Okay, I guess I don't know how it happened, but I'm not sharing it anymore. So thank you, and I'm happy to answer the questions about stories, more specifically if or any questions that you may have.
Thank you so much, Neringa. So now we go to Yulia for her comments, and I also invited both Yulia and Arvidas to mention their own work also, which, if relevant. Thank you.
Thank you, Davila, for the invitation, and thank you, Naringa, for the text we read and for the presentation which brought this context. And now we know more how you wrote these stories. And thank you for doing this, because I think it's very, very important. Thank you for being in Ukraine and doing this field work there. So I will start because I'm a historian. I never write ethnographic literature. So for me, this is something which is so interesting as a historian, how you can use this material and write a very beautiful fiction based on this material. So I was mainly thinking about this genre of ethnographic fiction, and I wanted to ask you more about how, like, whether you write somewhere before you present these stories, or maybe in some article which will be published, but mainly about the process, how you decide on what you will take from the field work, how, like, what you will fictionalize and what you will leave as it was like said by people. So because I think what you said about testimonies as the form of justice and truth is very important here. And for me, this is kind of a methodological question also, how you present like this truth and how you make do justice to these people's stories in your text, and whether it is possible to kind of write more about the process of you making these choices. So I think this is what was for me very interesting like, thinking about ethnography as a historian. So this is maybe for you something obvious, but for me, it's something new, and I was wondering how you do it. So this was the first reflection. And then I also thought about specifically about the content of the stories. I was thinking about these different forms of occupation in a way, because in your story, when you write about Oleg, and he is mentioning this propaganda, and you also in your presentation, in this short presentation, but you also use this word that this is like Russian propaganda is a tool of occupation as well. And then in the story, for those of you who didn't read it, so I really recommend to read the stories. But there is a man, Oleg, who is speaking about cognitive occupation. So he's saying that this Russian propaganda, it actually occupies your mind, so that you see the world, and here at least he can see and reflect that sometimes he thinks about something and then he reflects that this is actually something which comes from these propaganda narratives. And his way, as I think, of resistance or this reclaiming life, right, is exactly like resisting this cognitive occupation and this propaganda narratives. And also I was thinking, because of today, of these massive attacks, and we I think also saw this news, and like when Russia is bombing Ukraine every day and destroying civilians' lives, and actually even if Russia like destroys this like buildings, some people die every day, but it also kind of doesn't give a chance for people to live their lives like normal lives, because people always think about this possibility to be bombed. So you cannot plan something like you plan in a normal life. And I think about this concept of vertical occupation, which was introduced by Svetlana Matvienko when she writes that this kind of constant threat which comes from the air is also a way to occupy the territory, because people still cannot have their normal lives there. So I think that your stories also show this kind of different ways of occupation. So when you were writing about this cognitive occupation, I was also thinking about this vertical occupation, and all ways Russia uses to kind of control people's life. And this is something I think which should be realized by us who maybe don't live in Ukraine or don't spend so much like time in Ukraine, how much life becomes like dependent on not you, right? So you cannot control a lot, and then it's also a kind of a way to occupy you, because it occupies your mind, your like daily routines and everything. So I think this was a very like interesting and very important contribution to this discussion on occupation. And for me especially, it was interesting in one of your stories, the first one about helicopter, when you write about this cat, and you also in some parts you mention a dog. And for me, this like experiences of dogs, cats, and animals in the world is something what interests me a lot. And I was also thinking about like your like conscious decision to bring these non-human lives in these stories, or it was something what was very kind of natural to be part of the stories because they were mentioned by people. So I just was wondering what you thought about this kind of animals experiences in the world. And I will stop here. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you, Julia.
Thank you so much, Julia. Now we'll go to Arvidas and then we'll give Neringa to respond briefly to the
Well,
discussants. Thank you.
thanks a lot for inviting me and Neringa for such wonderful work. I have many things to say and ask, and I scramble in my head in terms of the order I should do that. But perhaps first I'll react and then I'll ask if that's okay. Well, to me, the genre that you chose, a novel, fictional, nonfiction, uh, is that seems very significant because in certain ways it's impossible to narrate a war in a convincing way if you stick to factuality, because war happens at different layers, emotional, factual, but also in terms of very deep archetypical meaning layer, which depersonalized and fictionalized stories like myths, like mythological language, kind of brings forth, I would say. And I think what you do with this is exactly that. You speak of very deep humanity, mm, that sort of happens to take shape in these life stories of Ukrainians in war. And I think what's valuable here is how you use what I improvisedly called empathic objects. So maybe a thick air through which you walk, the ribbon on a grave, chickens being shot, as these markers for that allow the reader to understand, to somehow associate, affiliate with the experience, and leads the way for the reader to through the story, the insight that you're trying to describe. But also the war itself is full of narratives. It's infused with narrativity, from propaganda that you mentioned to different forms of mediatization and digital interaction. You have TikTok videos, you have Facebook stories, reels, and whatnot. The fighting itself is done through gathering support from viewers online. And actually, well, that's treading a bit on my research territory, but that's sort of the generation of support of donations, etc. That is being done through telling stories online, and these stories are non-factual. Sometimes there are montages. They're made out of factual clips, but the story that's being told is speaks of a third topic. Then you have the surreality of the experience itself that is better expressed through referring to Tolkien about orcs and elves and all that, or zombies, or all of these cyborgs and science fiction, better than through telling a factual sort of what's going on the ground type of information. And it speaks to fundamental sort of perhaps Christian archetypes of resisting the evil, or preserving the soul through maintaining your freedom, through sacrificing yourself for something else. So there's also a very deep moral structure of these stories. And I think this kind of storytelling that you do, Neringa, is exactly allowing to tap into all of this rich content that a traditional scientific sort of social sciences narrative would omit. Um, Now, if I had to ask a few questions, I was you kind of answered that. It's you're telling stories of truth, but what kind of truth? It's not a factual truth, but is it anthropological, human truth, truth of existential truth, truth of experience? How do you define that kind of truth that you're telling? Uh, and also, uh, how is the anonymity working here? Are people willing to be recognized in these stories? Do they want to be anonymized? Because if you take away the personhood, the actual person, it somehow actually lifts the story into that level where this could happen to anyone, or this is what humanity is like. It speaks to human condition when you separate it from a particularity, paradoxically. Um, and this kind of empathic storytelling allows for an act of recognition, which and this is where my work again comes in, where I try to study Lithuanians who support Ukraine. So Lithuanian volunteers who bring humanitarian aid and other kinds of aid to Ukraine. They leave their families behind and go on quite risky journeys to Ukraine to bring support. I joined a few of these trips and I did my own field work, which is perhaps beyond the point right now. But my core question was exactly this: how come these people choose to do that? Why do Lithuanian, but also Baltic states in general, are more eager to do that than Portugal or I don't know or other societies. Let's put it that way. Mm. And so my theorizing was about empathic recognition of experience, of human experience that I just spoke about. So that kind of feeds into what you did. I thought one last point I would like to make was the notion that how can we conceptualize the idea of this recovery and transformation. It's not only a recovery because it's not really a recovery after you make honey out of the flowers that grow in minefields. That's something beyond recovery. I was trying to play with the notion of social vitality. Vitality being the capacity to get injured and uh, grow through injury beyond that into some sort of transformed self, uh, which I also kind of experienced in Kharkiv when I was there. It's this sort of proud uh, refutal of the immediate condition, and this beautiful people walking in parks as if there was no war happening, this vitality of deep, deep life despite destruction. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Thank you so much, Arvidas. So Neringa, please respond, but very briefly, because I definitely would like to leave time for the audience as well.
Okay. Well, I'm very privileged to hear from you both, Yulia and Arvide, and these are amazing comments about empathy and everything and forms of occupation. So I was taking detailed notes. How not to take much time because these questions are big. I will guess I'll just say a few things, how I decide what to fictionalize. So basically, all the facts are true in the stories. The characters sometimes are bundled. I take from different people something and put together, like counting in the first story is true. It's a form of trauma. I just figured it out later after I did the during the interview, actually, the person told me about it, that this is a form of trauma, but only later I read that this is 2% of people that are affected that way, and then they count, everything, even after that. So So that counting is also a form of vitality. I think that's a terrific way to look at this instead of resistance or resilience. But also, you know, it shows the effects of the war. How I decided, it's very hard to say I'm writing a book myself. And one of the major motives for me to write those stories was, when I say the truth, I don't mean my truth, I mean people's truth, you know, the testimonies themselves when I spoke in the presentation. So they testify what happened, and I am kind of, I'm not claiming this is the truth. I'm just saying, you know, it's built on their story. But I'm just lost my train of thought. Okay, so one of the major motives was to get those stories earlier than scientific or social science articles, because that takes years. And people wanted me to speak about that. So this was kind of my motive to write those stories. And how I chose, why specific facts, you know, I remember I came back from Kharkiv this last winter, and I just couldn't do anything. And that's, you know, their stories were very much mirroring in my mind. And this is about empathy that Arvidas talked about. So they were kind of mirroring, and you cannot unsee what you have seen. And, you know, my kind of thinking through all of this was to just write. And something that kind of, you know, intuitively I felt, you know, stood out very much. That's how, like, talk about liberation. It's basically in every interview, you know, this is very common. What are we liberated from, right? And this is their own way to speak against Russian propaganda. Okay, so I will write to you personally. Animals are everywhere. People take guinea pigs. I don't know how they do that. I have guinea pigs at home. To Switzerland, they took during occupation. They took parrots under their jackets, you know, when they leave. They stay, like one person stayed in a Zoom because those who were taking people out, evacuating, they said they are not taking animals. So animals are everywhere. Now, you know, if you go to Ukraine, I feel sometimes that cats are taking over. They are everywhere too. And if you travel from, let's say, Kharkiv to Kiev, last time I traveled with 2 cats and 1 big dog, and this time sitting next to me, and this time there were cats, but also parrots. So this is a very good topic that you are focusing on. And Arvid, they just very much everything to the point, very important insights. Thank you, both of you. I will write in more detail.
Thank you so much, Neringa, for the responses. And we have about 13 minutes for comments and questions from the audience. So if anybody would like to, Yulia Soroka, please.
Oh, hello, colleagues. Thank you for this workshop, and thank you, Neringa, for this absolutely specific text and for your work. It's like amazing how many efforts you did to have or to research, to be in this place. I'm personally. It was my first time to read this genre of literature, and I even now I cannot. I don't know exactly how what is the right way to name it. Is it a literature, or it's a science, or it's or otherwise what does it mean? Ethnography or anthropology? Is it a science or it's a literature? It's very impressive, and the text I feel it's like a very good literature, even if we don't think that it's real people and real situation. It's very good literature with very strong and very strong emotion and very strong emotional dynamic and within and. Yeah, especially this is a question of liberation because when I read this I feel like, oh no, okay, it's three-part, maybe three-part, it will be like dynamic with kind of happy end in the end or something like force me to expect this. And when I understand that it's another liberation, not liberation assumed from Russia, but otherwise I was very depressed, and all these pages I when I read I almost crying in all of these scenes. This list of things which when your character. Like list the things which she have to cannot leave and have to bring somewhere if she decided to leave this place. It's list of these things is absolutely beautiful. Yeah, and uh, all of this raise a question of metaphor for me. What is because we already have a lot of metaphor in sociology and in ethnography, and what to do with this, how to manage with this. And another question for me rise maybe more close to the kind of scientific aspect of this, because I also have experience to be under occupation at the beginning of the war in Mariupol, and I published ethnography about this, and maybe it will be the like direct question to you. Do you think that all of this story of occupation about territory which was deoccupied and about territory which now under occupation, what whether it will be the one topic of occupation, one subject of occupation, or it's like absolutely separate situation, separate story, and separate object which we need to explore some kind of different way. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Neringa. Maybe you could respond briefly.
Yeah, just very briefly. Thank you, Julia, so very much for your feedback and for reading these stories. I very much appreciate it. And Julia actually is the official advisor to this project. Well, the social science part, not my story part. So thank you, Julia. Regarding, that's the question that is on my mind all the time, because I see lots of similarities in general, between like Lithuania's occupation, what kind of strategies they used, what they used in 2014, and what they have used during 2022 in the territories that were deoccupied, and what they are using now. So of course, the territories that were deoccupied, they are limited to the extent that they were not able to really carry out lots of administrative changes. Now they are happening in Mariupol. They have been doing these things in Donetsk, but this was the prehistory in a sense. Lots of things and strategies are the same, even if we have those differences, between like Bucha, which was 1 month, right, and very violent, and some other places. So this is what I'm thinking through, how to understand those differences in 2022, but overall in general. So that's a very important question. And I don't have, a definite answer yet.
Thank you so much. We still have questions. We still have time for questions and comments. It's not much, 6 minutes, but maybe somebody else would like to comment or ask something. Right, while we are waiting, I do have a burning question myself. And I'm very curious to think, Neringa, what you think about the special connection. I guess Arvidas mentioned it. I was also very intrigued by it, this vicarious identification between Lithuanians and Ukrainians. Since this is Lituanus, I have to ask that. Yourself, you are a living example of a Lithuanian going many times to Ukraine to dangerous situations and doing research. So, is there that special connection? Where does it come from?
Well, I could just refer back, Dovila, to your article, which very much, explores that issue about vicarious identification of Lithuanians. So Lithuanians lived through the history of occupation, and I very much support your idea that because of that identification, there is such support of to Ukraine. And if I was in Poland, I was happy to see one flag, and then I was pointed out, that this is actually a consulate. And in Lithuania, there are as many flags of Lithuania as well as of Ukraine. And the biggest flag when you come to Vilnius on Subachu Street is actually Ukrainian, not Lithuanian. So I'm just very happy, and it's kind of it's not just the Lithuanian story. People from other countries join Ukrainians, and there is a huge support even in the United States, no matter the current administration position, which is also changing now. So. Where it comes from, I believe it's from the common history and the history of occupation.
Occupation matters a lot. And this is what you wrote in the beginning of your article, that the Baltic states have experienced occupation, and that's why we should be very interested in this topic.
Right. And, regarding, I didn't respond, but also that fictionalizing part, it is still, even if it's ethnographic and based on true facts, like, documentary novels or some other, I'm not a literary scholar or a writer, but I imagine that if it's a fiction, it's a fiction already, no matter, the details themselves. And yes, the fact that I try to make this anonymous, and what Arvidas pointed out, it's just really up to readers to decide, whether it could be read as a Ukrainian story, whether it could be read as a human story. And I imagine myself, that these stories coexist to some extent if they have like a very, very small a niche, with a lot of stories that circulate and literary stories in Ukraine. So it's just, the part of the dialogue, and it's one form to speak about it.
Thank you. Yulia has her hand up. Yulia Yurchuk.
Yeah, thank you very much. I just wanted to reflect on the fact that in Ukraine there are so many books now written about the experiences of war, and they are also very often this kind of ethnographic fiction. They are fictionalized and not, so it's difficult to put them into some genre. Maybe you also read some translations of them, like Victoria Amelina's book. It's very much like on the border of all genres, right? And I think as a historian that this is our like human reaction to this enormous events which are happening, and this is this history of the present, because we process it and we make meaning by like writing, right? And Neringa also said that for her it's kind of the process of processing what what you saw and experienced in Ukraine. I also think this is something very close, and I really liked Arvida's notion of vitality, because I think this is exactly what it's all about, because we speak a lot about this like resilience, resistance, but I think that the like in the center of all this, it's this human striving to live, right? This is the drive for life, and this is vitality. For me, as I see it. So this is what I wanted to say. And I see the hand here, so I will just be silent.
Thank you. Thank you. So we have time for one last question or comment from Aya Sakova.
Hello, thank you so much for this very interesting discussion. I have not read the stories yet, but I am now very curious to read them, and I will. I'm happy that I was here. I just wanted to, I'm coming from the perspective of the literary scholar, from perspective of what can literature do. And you were very interestingly saying that you chose to write those stories because of first of all, conveying emotions, as I understood. Then you had the need because you had to process them, the stories yourself. And then you also, I think, said that people wanted to hear those stories, kind of like. Actually, that's kind of reflecting back. And my question was, did I understand correctly that you went there to do like scholarly work and you ended up writing first literature? So, or you already had the intention to publish also like literary stories of what you are researching?
Well, yeah, thank you so much for the question. My initial idea to write them was to deliver what I have learned about occupation from now over 100, no, 140 interviews. And multiple visits to different places. So because I know that it will take a long time and people wanted those stories to be heard, so I wrote a short pieces that I published in like scholarly venues, which were kind of short, not articles, and I wrote this. So it was definitely part of myself also, and those dreams in the middle of the second story, how we started killing in our dreams. It's also, these are my own dreams. I never dreamt of killing anything. And I realized that the war is changing us all, and as some Ukrainians said, metaphorically, the war turned us into murderers. We never, planned to kill. So of course, those stories run through me, through my own body. So I'm just a vessel to kind of process them. And but I see myself still, as an anthropologist, and as someone who tries to get their voice out. It's not my own per se.
Thank you so much. That's a beautiful ending. And I would also like to thank everybody who actually put in comments and questions in the chat. Thank you so much for Laura, who joined us from Argentina. I mean, it's amazing. We have everywhere people even from Argentina joining us. That's fantastic. And there will be more Lituanus seminars, online seminars. And please follow us on Facebook, and please subscribe to our magazine. It's to our journal. I hope you'll find it interesting. And once again, Neringa's work is available for free online on our website. And thank you very much for joining us this beautiful summer evening or day. And I hope to see you in our future webinars in the coming months. Thank you.
Thank you all.